Okay. Okay. All right, can I get a thumbs up when we're ready from the camera team? Excellent. Right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Booking Club Live. I'm Jack Aldane, the host and producer of the Booking Club. For those of you who don't know, the Booking Club is the podcast where I take authors and commentators out to their favourite restaurants. Evidently, this is not Geoff's favourite restaurant, unless the restaurant were themed around some general annual meeting of investors. I don't know of any like that. But we spoke on a previous episode about Geoff's first book, Where Did I Go Right? How the Left Lost Me. And we'll be speaking on this episode live at the Battle of Ideas Festival about his latest book, The British Bloke Decoded. From banter to man flu, everything finally explained. Geoff, thanks for coming on and welcome.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here. That's very kind, very kind. I got to say, it's quite inspiring that I heard somebody sitting near the front say, "What's this one?" There's so much stuff going on, no idea. I don't know what this could be. I got to say, no, I'm looking forward to chat. There's so many like edgy thinkers here. I'm going to say some edgy stuff, but I will be taking the piss as well. I hope that's okay. This will be, there'll be some silly comments, frivolous stuff as well as the discourse. Gonna do some discourse.
I said I was going to explain this bottle of WD-40 next to me. People who are listening to this on audio only will be wondering what the hell's going on here. But my chair had a squeak in it. So there's a guy who came up and was spraying it. And I think we've just about managed it, though I'm not going to push my luck.
I thought it was because I was 47. I thought you just watched me getting done. Did anybody need to get crushed on the stairs there? Just of all the places that there'd be a safety issue, it'd be a real surprise in the national news at a Battle of Ideas festival. 17 people were hospitalised on the stairs. But that's good, that's reassuring.
It's reassuring, and also if we needed a prop to represent blokiness, yes. I mean, you can do better than a bottle of WD-40, couldn't you?
I'd throw in an Allen key as well, if we're going
right.
to... probably like a multi-Allen key, going right up. Anyway, that's just my own thing.
So, Geoff, to get to your book, you think you might have cracked the code, as it were, about what makes the typical British guy tick. He's been around for a long time, hasn't he, the British bloke? He's gone through many iterations, had many systems updates. But tell us sort of when you thought, or what brought you to the conclusion that you had enough information about this modern day British archetype to write a book about it.
Well, 47 years of unbroken service. I thought I've done the field work and I was ready to share my conclusions. I mean, just on a simple level, like the metrics, I'm very average, like 5'9". I've got size 9 feet. I'm a bit over 13 stone, believe it or not. That's all absolutely within the average range in terms of my interests. Football, Star Wars, KFC, I'm so... Favourite sitcom was Fools and Horses, favourite documentary was The Making of Fools and Horses. I just thought, if there's just one person that absolutely... politically, even in, if in the comedy world, I'm sometimes seen as alternative proposition. The truth is, where I sit on the political spectrum probably is about bang in the middle, which is somewhere kind of socially liberal, economically a little bit right of centre, So I kind of thought that was a good starting point to articulate that. And weirdly, again, in the comedy world, it's all very esoteric and, they're looking for real alternative characters. Whereas I'm absolutely the opposite. When I go on stage, I sort of look like an electrician, really. I mean, that's my aesthetic. So I sort of thought, that was an interesting point. And then there was also that point in time, after kind of that wave of feminism in the 2010s, after Me Too, I understood all that stuff, but then there was this kind of pejorative building up around men and masculinity generally, and at that time, I still have a son, and I was kind of thinking, I'm not sure all of this is entirely fair. Like the idea that Donald Trump is a bit unpredictable, was being applied to all men, and some of these kind of strong men, world leaders, were being held up of examples of exactly what masculinity was. And I sort of thought, well, blokes are. The rank and file bloke is just a decent person like anybody, trying to be a dependable presence for the people that he loves. Probably not always remembering birthdays, perhaps. It's not always a strong point. Maybe expecting medals for doing household chores. But essentially trying his best. So I just thought, I wanted it to be a funny book, that's the point, but there is elements of sort of social commentary in it. So there are, of course, chapters on why men love curry, but there's also chapters on why it's okay for men to cry, within reason. Okay? I'll just put it like that.
Let's talk about the spectrum of reason there when it comes to tears in a moment. I was actually going to ask you to give us a sort of a profile breakdown of the archetypal British bloke to give people a sense of who this persona really amounts to. But you kind of did by describing yourself, didn't you?
It's because I talk a lot, really. I think that if you looked, those diagrams, you guys are smart people. The ones with loads of dots? What's those called? The ones that congregate in the middle? The dot diagram. Scattergraph,
right.
I know it, right? Scattergraph, I think that's where most people are, but the egregious actions of men like Harvey Weinstein at the far end were being held up as a reason to sort of bash the male brand, and there was this sort of share price that had been steadily tumbling, that was moving into a massive sell-off, and I sort of thought, if you looked at particularly, what's happening with younger men, it's quite dangerous in a way, to make out that maleness in itself is some sort of toxic or unpleasant state of being. So it was a gentle and sympathetic audit of the kind of blokey psyche.
Let's address the elephant in the room here. We are both blokes, but we are of different generations. You are very much Gen X. I am Gen Y. A lot of people online have said that we looked very similar.
It's good to see you, son.
Like the last two, like the last two remaining in a police lineup. But there has obviously been. I can tell that there is a big difference between men your age and men my age, and then we can talk about men even younger than both of us, the Gen Zs that you've actually interacted with quite a lot recently through going to Ibiza. You can tell us about your experience there.
You mentioned the Gen X thing. Yeah, we are a generation that don't really want to give up doing fun stuff, really.
When you look at a Gen Y guy like me, where do you see the biggest?
What is Gen Y? I didn't know there was I thought it was millennials.
Millennials is Gen Y.
Oh, I see. Millennials.
Yeah. When you look at a millennial, where do you see the biggest
differences? You should have said
differences?
Gen Y. When you say millennials, I go, millennials.
Well, come on, let's have it.
You have too many milks.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing all right then, aren't
look,
we?
it's a metaphor for a broader problem within your generation. But no, I think that, look, there are economic differences as well. The very fact I was able to go to Ibiza was partly because, there's a certain fortuitous nature of my generation financially. So I think millennial men are sort of caught in this weird sort of world where they're hustling and stuff. They're expected to be sensitive. There's actually a big pressure point there. And then, Gen Z males, broadly speaking, are dealing with just emerging into a world that doesn't seem to like them much, really, and that's been their only experience. At least I had a bit where, we were doing all right, men. We were sort of cresting the wave, and maybe some of the privileges that we had were excessive, and some of the stuff we got away with wasn't appropriate. But I certainly knew both sides of it. Whereas I look at my son, and I start the book with talking to my son about banter. Just simply a simple social process between males such as banter, which probably isn't viewed as favourably these days. I mean, we look at recently at the Strictly scandal thing where the guy put his hand and she moved it. It's just a fucking joke between friends, but my God, it was held up to be so much more than that. And I think more widely speaking, what I see as good-natured fun between friends could be viewed by younger people as something more malevolent.
I see. Okay, well, the way I see the cascade of generations going back from, I say the boomer generation down to Gen Z now, is that, a boomer might look at somebody your age and ask why it is that you never, you don't polish your shoes often enough. If you're going to leave the house, polish your shoes.
Yeah.
You might look at somebody my age and sort of say, why don't you wear a shirt when you go out? To me, I don't need to wear a shirt.
It feels like these are personal things that you've thought about me.
No, it's all personal at the end of the day,
But you know what?
Jeff,
It's true. Like,
it's all biography.
But that's the point, is like, to my dad, I was very limp. The fact that I had a man bag and that I moisturised. He's like, anything else, son? You know what I mean? You're gonna study drama? He was worried. yeah, like the fact that I couldn't change the oil on my own car. Like this is a constant process. My dad had views around punctuality, which I talk about in the book, which was early is on time, punctual is late, and I remember him frying my head with that. But it was a very sort of macho thing. You got to get there, so get there an hour early, and then just sit. And wait, and I suppose what he was, he did have views of masculine forbearance. Like there's a chapter in the book called "Man Up." Now a lot of people get really uncomfortable, certainly in the field that I work in, when you use a phrase like that. But I was sort of saying that the idea that blokes could sometimes just withstand privations for the good of the group, to just suck it up a little bit, I didn't necessarily think was a totally bad thing. But when I did the Radio 4 show, Geoff Norcott's Working Men's Club, that episode got complaints. There was a lot. Even somebody launching a sort of nuanced debate of that phrase was problematic for some people.
Let's talk about your appearance on Politics Live. It didn't happen so long ago, but if we're going to get into the discourse in any way, shape or form here, there was a conversation around the idea of a minister for men, somebody who would preside over the issues of men's mental health. And you, I think, sort of said that in many respects you broadly supported the idea in principle. You thought that there was a need there. But it all kind of went off the rails, the conversation, didn't it? As these things often do.
Well, I don't know if anybody remembers that on Politics Live. It was a sequence of events, the sort of butterfly effect that ended up with Lawrence Fox getting cancelled. It's hard to explain exactly how each step of that occurred. But I'd gone on the book, and I'd gone on the show, and they said to me, like, at first I thought Minister for Men just sounded like an aftershave from the 70s, but these are the sort of comic impulses you have to bat away when you're a comic. Just don't say that, Geoff. It's live telly. Don't say that. So at the time I was like, I wasn't sure. I was sort of like, I don't really know. I kind of felt that on the one hand, I'm wary of breaking everything down into identities, but you also felt, well, if there's one for women, there are specific issues that men face. But what happened then was I got a lot of pushback on things that I wasn't expecting. So, for example, I said, the journalist on my left, Ava, I get on fine with, and we've had constructive discussions since. But I said, like with COVID, men were 61% more likely to die of COVID, and she pointed out that women did more of the housework during the pandemic. And I was like, okay, well, still feel like dying's worse, but And then I thought, I'll get on safer ground here. I talked about this, this genuine and serious issue about male suicide, and being the biggest killer of men under 45. And it was pointed out to me that women attempt suicide more often. They're just not as successful. And I was like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, what is going on in this conversation? And Ava got a lot of the stick, right? I think unfairly, because it's when underreported that the former head of the TUC to my right, Frances, who again I get on all right with, but she just said to me, what about sexual harassment? I was like, well, I think it's bad. Like, I think that's a fairly safe and solid position. And so she was, I felt like what was happening was like, you don't get to talk about this stuff because there's other, it was almost like, because men do bad stuff, some men, you don't get to talk about this. I felt like we could work on all the problems, but evidently they only had bandwidth for one. And she said to me, what about sexual harassment? And she genuinely, and you can watch it on YouTube if you like to check, but she said to me, what about you if you start an organisation called Blokes Against Sexual Harassment? Genuinely, she said that to me. And I thought the acronym of that would spell BASH. That's not... It wouldn't... How inappropriate would that be? Like, it wouldn't even sound like I was definitely against it. More like I was trying to create like an online meeting space or something.
I can just see the advert now, you walking towards the camera. So, lads... have a bash.
Yeah, have a bash.
Stop sexually harassing people.
Both of the uses of that word are not good if you're talking about men's interactions with women.
Exactly.
And so I just sat there and I thought, what the fuck is going on? Like, have I taken ketamine or something? Because I felt like the points that I was making were fair, but you worry because it's 2024. I'm thinking, I'm going to be the bad guy here somehow. I'm going to be the one that's wrong for asserting myself. But actually, the response to that clip originally, before Lawrence Fox got involved, was very positive. Men and women, who were sharing stories of men that were in trouble emotionally, financially, men that they'd lost too early to suicide. So it kind of took me into that world of discourse about men. And what you realise there is just how many people, male and female, are doing incredible work to make things better.
The notes have dropped. Let's just talk now.
Here we go.
Well, you mentioned men in financial trouble. you mentioned you write a whole chapter in the book about gambling. I was actually quite surprised. It might be naive of me to find out that more than half of men gamble. But this is one of those areas that you could imagine a minister for men kind of presiding over as a predominantly male pastime, one that has serious consequences, one that cascades to consequences within families especially. You and I have this in common. We don't really get the draw of gambling, but clearly we're in a minority among our sex in this country. Perhaps we can talk a little bit about that, about the mentality that you've learned through writing this book of certain men who, though you may not share anything in common with, say a lot about what it means to be a bloke in modern Britain.
Well, that's the thing, is I do believe that masculinity has certain things that over-represent, and like risk, jeopardy, testosterone is a part of that draws you towards these things. But it's all about managing those impulses. And let's be honest, blokes, we are sometimes a bit too confident in our own abilities to, just generally, but also to, predict the future. I mean, that's essentially...
That's kind of where a lot of gambling addiction comes from. That's kind of what gambling is. It's literally
thinking, I know there's a huge industry and make billions, but I alone have worked this one out, right? And they really, and these adverts as well, they're marketed so well into the male psyche. There's some guy there who looks like someone out of a Guy Ritchie film. He's got some blonde on his arm, and he's like, the latest in play odds now. And then, rather than you just locked in your toilet, sitting there in your pants, just refreshing the odds, which is actually the reality of gambling. And if the government were to do an advert. Because we do seem to have lost the ability to actually just persuade. I do miss those terrifying adverts of the 80s that would just scare the living shit out of you as a way of stopping you doing something. Now it's probably going to be they'll ban it. They'll up the age for men. But I would actually say this is the reality of gambling. You're not sitting on the bench with the manager. You're not on the pitch. You're at home. You're wasting money. You would just try. It does bother me, actually, that we've lost that even inclination to inform and persuade. We'll just ban it. Let's just make that decision on people's behalf.
Yeah, I mean, again, on the subject of gambling, it's you spoke to one friend of yours who really does like a flutter, and he said that the draw of it for him, the appeal, he likened to that feeling, as he put it, when a car stops in front of you and you have to slam on the brakes really quickly, and he was like, that's what it's all about. And
I was like, that's a horrible feeling. I just don't get it. And now I know, like every rush, there are certain intoxicating highs that I do enjoy, and maybe people that won't understand those necessarily. But it's clearly a compulsion. Now there are women women are gambling more. I mean, you've seen the adverts now, and there's always been that difference. I mean, it's funny. My dad used to gamble a bit, and it was always very negative. But my mum, when she went to the bingo, it was a flutter. You spent 80 quid. It's just a flutter. And you see the adverts now for women, female bingo sites. They're going, it's just me time, me do. It's gambling. It is still gambling. But there's definitely a case that problem gambling vastly overrepresents among young males in particular.
Picking up the notes again, because you also in the book delineate, you specify pink jobs and blue jobs. This is going back to a quote from Theresa May, you might remember, who spoke about boys' jobs and girls' jobs on an interview with her husband. Didn't go down so well. But I wanted to ask you...
Well, it didn't go down well. Like most people in the real country never had an issue with it. But at the time, I was working as a writer on a topical show, and I remember them going, nobody thinks like this. I was like, I think everybody sort of thinks like this a little bit.
Again, you're very. I mean, one of the things that I love about your comedy is that you're brilliantly perceptive and you're incredibly honest. And when you mention, for example, the difficulty of getting a bloke around the house to take up those toiletries on the stairs to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, that always eludes me. Always.
It's really weird. I had a routine for years, which was about...
love of recognition there.
Which was about... I mean, this is the point. Some of the book is just trying... It's not just to sort of help blokes feel seen. It's actually to unpack some of the more baffling elements of male behaviour to women as well.
I'm still trying to... psychoanalyzing myself all the time to understand why it is that I don't do certain jobs willingly and others
I wrote about it. I did a routine about it for years. My wife saw me do the routine in comedy clubs, and she would also see me ignore the stuff. Not ignore... I just didn't see it, I'm just tunnel vision. I don't know why. But then I suppose there was also just a difference in perception, and this is partly what the book delves into. It's not a scientific thing, but there's a part of me. She likes cooperation, So if we're in the kitchen, she wants to pass on. I'm like, I'll do it. So I think, well, if you put it up that many steps, maybe just carry on all the way to the bathroom.
I'm just going to point out that both my wife and my mother are in the audience.
Come on, Jack. Man up.
I know exactly, but this is it. I mean, all this is ringing so true. I have a theory that I think that men like to do tasks, chores, jobs, whatever it is, where they fix something and then they can stand back and their work will last the test of time. Washing up does not do that. You're doing it again the next day and the next day and the next day. Anything that requires you to quite literally rinse and repeat doesn't have that same buzz of being able to stand back and take pride in your work.
Yeah, we're looking for prestige, and you notice this often as well when men cook. It's like, just Daddy's special spag bowl tonight, guys, and it'll often be things that can be done in one pot as well. Like if you think a roast dinner, if ever, like my wife can do a roast, she can multitask, she can think about it, she gets the oven warm. I mean, it's almost a bit like sex in a way, she gets the oven warm, she doesn't go in too fast. Okay, come on, I'm a stand-up comedian, all right? I know it's early for that sort of thing. But whereas if you think, and I'm probably going to pull you more now, but if you think about men like stuff that can all be done in one dish, get it hot, throw it in, 7 minutes.
Absolutely. No, I know exactly.
Not so, maybe 5 these days, yeah.
Listen, the microwave was invented for the benefit mostly of single men, let's be honest. I mean, that's kind of where that came from.
Yes.
But on back to blue jobs, pink jobs, I'm going to go through a list of jobs and you're going to tell me which you think they are, blue or pink.
Okay.
Some of them might seem a bit obvious, but I've tried to sort of, kind of get it to that ambiguous point where it could go either way. Okay, booking a hotel.
That is modern male reconnaissance blue.
Interesting. I thought you were going to say pink.
No, absolutely not.
And
that's
why?
your job now. Is you've got to go. You've got to scope out the area on Google Maps. But then you can become a bit obsessive with it as well because you're trying to. Those kids need feeding. And you're going, babe, no. If we just walk another mile, there's a 4.2 rated. She's like, we just need to put calories in these children. So I can get. I create little files now for where we're going. It's it's like the closest I get to feeling like a sort of general.
Yeah, I get that. The ingratiating the family with the locals on holiday once the hotel is booked.
With the local, my wife's going to talk in restaurants. She does this thing of, she sometimes responds to me loudly because she's just trying to widen the discussion. I don't know if that's just a consequence of having spent 5 days with me just desperately looking around to see if other people want to get in there. I mean, but it does speak to a truth, isn't it? Like, the women I know, the women I've experienced, that's a weird word, but they're just more sociable, and there was I think it's getting better now, but there was a period where even making these kind of observations in itself felt oddly contentious. I mean, there was a routine I used to have about women when they go swimming side by side so they can continue chatting, right? Like people are like, oh, I've seen lots of men do that. I'm like, you haven't, okay? Now, you just haven't. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be a point where Gen Z lads, that's when we know we'll have truly gone non-binary, whatever. But for now, I think that kind of observation still resonates.
Yeah. Swimming and jogging, I've seen many women paired up, jogging, talking together. I've never seen two men chatting.
It's isolation. I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. But I'm a stand-up comic, and I sleep really well in the Travelodge, and that's probably I need therapy for that. Maybe that's there's something about the smell of sad businessmen that just sets me at my ease, But I don't want to do more. But like 2 days on the road, I feel there's something kind of macho about that. Right, I'm going away, but I'm going to earn some money, babe. I'm going to be on the road. But 3 days, I get a bit sad and lonely. But 2 days is fine.
Okay, let's crack on with the list because in a moment we're going to bring it to the audience for questions. Gently letting down, and you don't see many of these days, gently letting down a door-to-door salesman at the door.
Gently is not going to be the mate. As soon as I can hear that my wife's being too nice to them, I'm downstairs. I was like, is everything okay, mate? Is everything okay? Or if I hear her on the phone and she goes like, that bit of a sales call where you should just hang up? She starts talking. I'm like, babe, please give me the phone. Babe, please give me the phone. And block the number. So I would say that, getting rid of a sales guy, that would be a blue on balance.
All right. Decorating a Christmas tree?
Decorating, no. Look, I'm going to sound, that's got to be a family thing, isn't it? But
there you go, see, that's the ambiguity.
I need to sell some books on things. But with a project manager, and we all know who that is.
Going to see who's at the door after 9 p.m?
Going to see, absolutely male. Anything outside after a certain time. And there's often this thing with ladies whereby they're in their pyjamas anyway. Like, they just, like slippers, dropping off kids at school. Sorry, I know this is really intolerant, but Dressing gowns are just get dressed. Are you awake? Are you up? Then be dressed. What's that, mate? Sorry?
Preferably they will be out of their pyjamas or dressing gowns.
That feels like another conversation, sir.
If you've read Geoff's first book, you'll know that he doesn't like the sight of people in their dressing gowns in public.
It's probably my most
general.
right-wing, intolerant view.
Yeah, I think this was the moment you realised you were right-wing, wasn't it? When you saw your mum in your dressing gown.
No, I know. No. When we lived on a council estate, I was a little bit judgy, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I come back from school and all the mums were still sitting on the stairs in their dressing gowns. I was like, for God's sake, you know. And they're like, you're 9, you know. You don't get to tell us, like, for God's sake, bloody get dressed, you know. So that might be when I first thought I might be a Tory.
All right. Cleaning up shattered glassware.
Shattered glassware.
From the kitchen.
Yeah, that's a good nuanced one because for danger, you know, men often do jobs that involve danger. Maybe a bloke. For comprehensiveness and effectiveness. Because I know that, babe, I've cleared up the glass. She goes, good, go upstairs for a minute. Because she just sees stuff more effectively.
Going to talk to a neighbour who's playing Come On Eileen at full blast at 1 a.m. on a fucking school night.
Do you want me to help out with this one? That sounds way too specific not to be real. I think that's got to be the bloke. But partly, weirdly, in my relationship, that's because I will be more conciliatory than my wife. I swear to God, I'm like, you're going to get me killed with your road rage one day. Because it won't be you, the bloke will see you and he'll just come and batter me. So I'm a reasonable diplomat. That would be, in my case, that would be me.
I also just loved your theory on the origin or the reason behind mansplaining in this book, which is obviously, you know, it's what forms part of the subtitle.
Do you really want to get into explaining mansplaining?
Well, no, I'll let you do it.
It's tricky.
But your theory is really fascinating because, you know, there are many people who sort of think, oh, well, you know, it's how men have always tried to attract the opposite sex. They've always had to display knowledge, etc. But you trace it back to childhood for most boys.
Yeah, I mean, I realise it's complicated because I'm sort of blaming mums. I'm sort of blaming women for mansplaining. That's a tricky sell.
To be fair, what you say is that where boys learn the facility of language a lot later than girls, their attempts or their ability to say what they see and be able to explain what they've learned and all the rest is sort of generally greeted with a kind of like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, it's over-congratulated.
Thank God he's not a complete moron.
And I give an example in the book, but I can remember, like, I would come back to my mum and go, Mummy, you know, like, there's a thing called the Second World War. She'll go, really? Was there? Tell me all about that. I'm like, well, I thought you'd know, but like, okay. I guess I'll have to unpack this for you, love. And then the problem is, you sort of remember early in life that was like, and then you fast forward to these boardrooms where you get some guy called Gavin who, you know, is selling all the women stuff that he doesn't think that they know. But it's very much a learned behaviour, and I don't know. I think that in a way, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is your mum should essentially go, and?
Yes.
Sometimes?
Yeah.
Well, you think I'm an idiot? I've read books, mate.
That's right.
You can't even conjugate verbs.
So the idea that boys then spend the rest of their lives thinking that women are fascinated by things that they know.
There is a little bit of that. I mean, again, like the sort of waters of comedy that I sort of like delve in is those truths that we know, and a lot of and not just women who've had kids, but when you're around a small boy, there is definitely cognitively between the ages of about 3 and 6 a massive difference. You know, girls are far smarter. They got bigger vocabulary. So during those years, boys need more encouragement. They're more emotional during those years. But the point is like, at what point do you start to unpick that? Maybe that's the constructive thing, is to recognise that, okay, all right, I don't need to congratulate him on every little thing.
Now to go to our audience. Are there questions? There are hands. I see 3 hands already. All from the left aisle. Yeah.
Quick question. If you had a time machine and you could travel at any time in history, when would be the best time to be a British bloke?
Good question.
50s. I mean, just aesthetically, the 50s. Just, you know, men wore hats, women wore skirts. You know, we knew what was what, mate. I have to watch it. I can delve very quickly into this world. I don't know. There was something about the confidence of those post-war years, and I do think that. I don't know if you ever fully win, so you can say, well, you liberate one side of you. Men did seem to die very young then. That was the other side of it. You know, I always thought when I watched that show, Mad Men, that a lot of those guys, you think, those guys had it made. You go, but they're all drinking and ruining their relationships. Maybe they weren't as happy as I think. So on an aesthetic level, probably the 50s. But
all right.
yeah, otherwise, I don't know. Now's all right.
Another question here from the... sorry, beg your pardon.
I've got, in educating Rita, from a working class background, Rita goes off, as you may remember, to university, and there's a scene where she becomes a kind of outsider to both the middle class and the working class. In your terrific first book, Where You Went Right, is there any kind of feed into your creativity from maybe, where she also experienced this kind of outsider status?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're getting at. I mean, it's interesting. My dad, who was also called Geoff Norcott, in a moment of inspiration in the delivery room, I go, it's kind of a weird name to get a sequel, but anyway. But after he passed, we got this. So he grew up in a council estate like me in South Wimbledon. Wimbledon does have shit bits, like he used to go to church in the village. And after he passed, he was part of that congregation. And then one of the congregations said to me, he said, well, the thing about your dad was he really was a man of both sides of the tracks. And we always thought that was a good description. You're absolutely right. Never feeling fully at home in one or the other. The only problem with that is on his plaque at St Mary's Church in Wimbledon, is it does say Geoff Norcott was a man of both sides of the tracks, which sort of sounds like we're saying he was bisexual, which we didn't. And I swear to God, it was up a year before we even thought that. So, but yeah, I think now, I mean, to use a modern buzzword, being class non-binary, there's a lot of people who are upwardly mobile working class who still have the value systems from their working class upbringings, but maybe the trappings of a more middle class life.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. This gentleman here has been waiting. Thank you.
So, leaving aside personal preferences or the wider politics of it, bloke versus a woman for the Tory leadership, just on that, any thoughts?
Well, it's got to be the woman in this case. I mean, the thing about the Tory party that's incredible is that, I don't know if you saw Christopher Chope said something like really old-fashioned the other day about women with young children can't be the leader of the opposition or something along those lines. And it was so old-fashioned it was almost like a bit of heritage sexism. We're like, oh yeah, that took me back. But the funny thing about the Conservative Party is if there's ever been a political organisation that are more desperate for a woman to just tell them what to do, it's these guys. They see Thatcher in everything, in like, those people that see it in the tea leaves. They saw it in Theresa May and it wasn't really there, and even less so in Liz Truss to an extent. I think Kemi could be the real deal in a way. And there was this moment on the GB News debate where she said, we're going to cut the crap. And somebody whooped. And I was like, my God, among the Conservative membership, a whoop is like a pitch invasion at Crown Green Bowls. So, I don't know if I think she'll win. I think she'll do a good job. I don't know if she's going to be leader by the next election, maybe, because a lot could happen. But of the two candidates available, if I was still a member, I would definitely vote for Kemi.
All right. Do we have time for one more?
Can I ask my question? Thanks. Hi, Geoff.
Hi.
I know you probably got high self-esteem, so this observation won't...
I'm a comedian, mate. I'll just make that point.
Exactly, yeah. So this observation hopefully, it won't make you question your identity too much, but you position yourself as the sort of average British bloke, socially liberal, fiscally sort of right-wing, but I would argue that the average British bloke is actually the opposite of that. So they'd be more socially conservative, but fiscally left-wing, which would make you the opposite of the average British bloke.
Yeah, kind of fucks the pitch of the book, mate.
No, but I brought this up with you before, Geoff, and I sort of said that whether you would accept that social conservatism may be having its time now that people are starting to understand maybe the limits.
I guess it comes
rights,
down to subjective of what you define as liberalism. I think, I'm talking about kind of 90s liberalism where just live and let live, don't really, as long as what you're doing doesn't interfere with me. So by those terms, maybe they are. By modern terms, maybe they're not. But I think you make a very good point. I mean, guy from Navarra Media, Aaron Bastani, I think saying some interesting stuff now. And he made a point about, if you actually look at Britain, a lot of people on immigration, they're further towards Farage, and on the economy, they're closer to Corbyn, and this is why Reform have done well, because you're absolutely right, there is that kind of dichotomy. People want to call it populism, but there's a new brand of politics emerging, and basically on a simple level, I think you make a very fair point.
Geoff will be signing books. He'll be signing copies of the British Bloke Decoded upstairs. So in a moment, we're going to just wrap up, but if there's anything more you have to say, Geoff, about your upcoming book. I know you've got a book coming out after this.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to pitch it, but the area of masculinity I think is interesting. But one of the things I'm just interested in your view in a way is like with anybody raising a boy at the moment, you use the phrase "tricky time to raise a boy," and it seems to resonate. And that's not to say that women don't face huge problems in terms of violence and aggression. But yeah, I think that would be the area. I mean, now I'm using this as a focus group, really. But something that I want to say. This book, is supposed to be a funny book with social discourse. But I think that there's certainly a comparison. I think you've alluded to it in my experience of growing up male and my sons. And if you look at the educational outcomes and all that stuff, I think that. So wish me luck. Basically, a Tuesday meeting with the publisher, so who knows? I'll be back next year touting that.
Excellent. And we never got around to talking about your adventures in Ibiza, but I'm sure that was all research.
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you very much. This was the Booking Club Live, ladies and gentlemen.
Much.
Thank you. Geoff Norcott.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.